A lot of you that know me know I didn't know my dad growing up. I was the product of a one-night stand. Didn't know my dad's name till I was 20, met him when I was 21. And so, I didn't have that giant absence of a father because I was raised a lot by my grandfather, who I called Ipa, and my grandmother, who I called Ima. So I was raised by them primarily through second grade. My grandfather was awesome. He really filled in that role a lot for me. And eventually I moved in with my mom and stepdad. My stepdad wasn't awesome. And so, I kind of had both kinds of examples. Like my grandfather, man, there's so many ways I want to be like him. He's an Army veteran and just a hard-working factory dude and, just all the stuff. And just a great dude. And my stepdad was kind of just all the opposite in a lot of ways, kind of a bully and not good to my mom. And my grandfather just always wanted to make stuff fun. When the moment was real, when the moment was serious, he wanted to lighten things up and make it fun. And if you've been around me at all, you might be like, a little bit of a correlation there, And definitely that's my grandfather. He had this field on the side of his yard that he rented out eventually so that people could put a little field of corn or soybeans or whatever in there. And he would take whatever he made from that little field and put it in a college fund for me, all while I was a kid growing up. And so eventually I had this little chunk of money to get me started to go to college. And I went to Kentucky Christian University right across the Ohio River in Kentucky. And I'll never forget when it was pre-registration, I had to go down and get my schedule, see the campus. I'd been there a couple times for these Christian student conventions for high schoolers that went on down there. But I was going this time as like, I'm going to be a student here. I'm going to go study Bible and ministry and all that. So it was just me and my grandfather. We drove down mostly Route 23, straight down the middle of Ohio, crossed the Ohio River, and ended up at Grayson Possum Scratch Llama Lick, Kentucky. There's a couple of gas stations, a Burger King, a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, and a college, and so it's like a truck stop, where you get off the interstate to get gas. And so we get the tour of the campus by a guy named Ken Beck, not Glenn Beck, but I will accidentally say his name once because this guy's name is Ken Beck. He was the dean of students. And real serious, like real, just real even-keeled dude, just never raised his voice, was very, Christian dean of students. That's all I have to say. And so it's just like, okay, that guy's interesting. But we got a tour, and we went around the campus, and I just remember the epic, this is a new beginning for me. Like when I lived with my mom and stepdad, third grade through senior year, I became a Christian when I was 15, and they fought me about going to church. And I didn't understand it. Like, I can't go to church. And they'd ground me from church, and they really opposed my faith. Now I was like, now I can like be who I want to be. I can live out my faith. I was kind of the opposite of a lot of students, I guess, teenagers. I wasn't going to party. I was like, man, I get to follow Jesus now and not have to fight every moment about it, like, for whatever reason. And so I was pumped about it. And we get back to Ken Beck's office, and he prints off my schedule. And this is a moment like, whoa, this is my first semester college schedule. We're looking through it, and I'm like, this is so cool. A new beginning. I get to start all over. No one even knows me here. This is great. And then Ken Beck says, do you have any questions about anything? Dan, Elvin, my grandfather, do you have any questions about anything? No, I think I'm good. And at that moment, my grandfather leaned forward, and he said, yeah, I've got a question. What night are the panty raids? It's a new beginning. It's a new beginning. My grandfather said that. A grandfather with a Buckeye card in his pocket said that. I was like, oh my gosh, I hate that I have to even explain this, but this is like in the 50s and 60s. It was like a prank where college boys would run into girls' dorms and steal their underwear as a trophy and be like, yeah! A grandfather said that to Ken Beck. Oh my gosh. And I was just like, oh, and this is a dad though, isn't it? Let's be really honest. Did you have dad moments like that as a kid growing up, even for the dads in the room, where you're like, oh no, dad, no. I've given many of those moments to my kids. On my birthday, we might go get Japanese hibachi, and it's not unusual after I eat more than 3 humans should eat of Japanese hibachi that I come out in the November night and I take my shirt off and run around the parking lot. No, Dad, put your shirt on, man. My gut's just sagging. I look like I'm 9 months pregnant, and I'm just out there running, man. And they're like, no, stop it, Dad. But those dads like, oh, Dad, oh, Dad. And so we come to an important scripture this morning. Ephesians 6:4, which says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Okay? So a dude named Paul wrote this. Funny thing about Paul was he was a skeptic, hater of Christians, a persecutor of Christians who became one. So this guy's got an epic story to begin with. And now he is such an influential leader in the Christian church of the first century that he writes letters inspired by God's Spirit to different churches in the Mediterranean world. And this one is written to Christians in a Greek city called Ephesus. So the letter to the Ephesian Christians is called Ephesians. And that was perfect timing, by the way, right when I went to boom, it disappears. You're messing with me because I'm a dad, all right? And so he writes this, and he just says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Now, we got a lot of dads at Momentum, super cool dads of all, flavors and, all different stupid personalities and all that. Like one is Josh Kaiser, goes to Momentum. Yeah, that's just me and you. That's Josh Kaiser. There's his beard. So he has 2 boys with Courtney. She's my admin assistant. This is Vaughn and Isaac. And one of the things he does is he busts their chops by talking about their favorite cartoon, CoComelon. And CoComelon is a show for babies. And they're like, Dad, we don't like CoComelon. Stop. No, we don't like CoComelon. We don't like. So now I text Josh and Courtney in a thread, and I'm like, hey, could you ask Vaughn and Isaac, like, what's their favorite episode so I know where to start when I start watching CoComelon? And I could just see them in their house. Dad, tell them we don't like CoComelon. We don't like, it's for babies. It's not for us, it's for babies. And so that's what dads do. They mess with kids a little bit. They get under their skins. There's a dude here affectionately named Jeremy Buckets. It's his nickname, Jeremy Buckets. Like this kind of bucket. He has a son named Jack. And about every 3 weeks, I bust Jack's chops from stage about how Jeremy Buckets just has mad skills in the basketball court, and Jack doesn't want to hear that about his dad. He does not have mad skills. He's terrible, or whatever. And Jeremy Buckets is always challenging him to basketball and just out there putting him on notice. He's like, come on, Jack, mess around and find out, And so there's just this rivalry on the basketball court between Jeremy Speth, who we call Jeremy Buckets, and Jack Speth. And here's the deal. So Paul's like, fathers, don't exasperate your children. I'm the opposite in some ways. I encourage this, okay? 15 points for Gryffindor, okay? But that is not exactly what Paul means here. Don't exasperate. He didn't say don't embarrass every once in a while with your shirt off. He didn't say don't cook your kid on the basketball court. He didn't say that, okay? So cook your kid on the basketball court. But here's the thing about dads. Like dads, they're so unique, and this is stereotypical. There are moms who will do this, and there are dads who don't do some of these things. But your dad will chuck you way high in the air and catch you. And a lot of times the mom's like, well, that's a little high. That's a little high, okay? They'll teach you to ride a bike. They'll carry you when you get hurt. I mean, some of my memories being a little kid with my grandfather was I fall asleep on the way home from wherever, and he carries me in. There's this big, strong dad type, carrying you in when you're a little kid. And they push you when you want to give up. I mean, a lot of times what a dad brings is security and challenge and also some fun. And so you probably will make your kid angry at times, Dad, like if you're doing it right, all right? If you're doing it right, you'll probably make them angry at times. But that's parenting, right? And that's so much of parenting is there are times your kids are going to get mad at you. 30 years ago, there was a leading child psychologist who told us, his name's Michael Lamb from Cambridge, and he reminded us, he said, fathers are the forgotten contributors to child development. And you really think about it, like right now, there's been this constant thing in society about how, like, we don't need dads, we don't need dads, we don't need dads. It's said in 8 million ways, it feels like, so much so that I've been surprised in, like, the last year, every once in a while, I see a commercial that is all about how much we need dads, and it's promoting some hashtag and website about the importance of dads in kids' lives, because every bit of data we have tells us kids need their dads. like every bit of data. And so I don't realistically think this verse means fathers, don't exasperate your kids. Don't ever do anything to get them angry. You're going to make them angry just by parenting. You're going to make them angry by parenting. It doesn't mean your kids should never get upset, annoyed, angry, displeased ever. That's not fair. It's not right. Exasperate really means to kind of provoke in a way that really pushes someone's buttons. Exasperate means to really get, really get to them in an up close and kind of personal way. To really maybe harp on their mistakes as a father, to shame them because of their weaknesses, to defeat them with your words, which some dads can definitely do or have done, to joke with them in a way that hurts or belittles them, where it gets too close to what's actually true. And you're actually, now these are half-truths you're joking about that are really hurtful. Or to just break their spirit on the basketball court. You don't want to break their spirit. You just want to cook them, okay? And so, ultimately, we shouldn't parent in a way that causes them to grow up to be angry adults. And that's what really this is about, is the exasperation that, is this deep-seated, I resent the way that I was raised. I resent the way that I was treated or as a kid. And that might be by being uninvolved, or it could be by being too involved, the helicopter parent kind of mentality. There's ways that could just build this resentment. It could be the way that you treat your wife. A lot of people grow up really angry at my dad, the way that he treated my mom. And that's the deep-seated resentment that exasperated them. It could be your relationship to addictive substances. It could be, a bunch of things that just makes them grow up as an angry young adult and adult then. And so, I think parenting alone, to be honest, is a good reason to see a therapist every once in a while. Partly because it's so much hard work and it's traumatizing to be a parent sometimes. It's just this hard work. But the truth is, when you're a parent, it is so good to have really good friends close to you or a professional counselor, and there's no shame in that you can say to, ask me tough questions about me. Ask me tough questions. What am I not aware of about myself? Because we all got blind spots. And so to sit down with someone who really loves you or doesn't have they don't have any qualms about telling you, here's something that I don't think you see about yourself and how controlling you are or angry you are about your child or whatever. How are my upbringing, my temperament, my weaknesses, my past experiences, how is that stuff unfairly affecting my kids? Ask me tough questions. And so, as much as I can help it, I don't want my kids to grow up angry. And I think it's the same with leadership. If you lead in any kind of way, I think it's a good thing every once in a while to just ask some really close friends or a professional therapist the same questions. What am I not aware of? Because I want to be a healthy leader. I want to be a healthy parent. And as much as I can help it, I don't want my people to grow up angry. You hear of people with family of origin issues. There's also leadership of origin issues. The reason I hate church is because I grew up with this particular priest. I grew up with this particular pastor or this elder or this domineering woman in our church, whatever it was, and they've got issues just because of someone that was a leader when they were a kid. So it goes on to say then, instead of exasperating them, making them grow up into angry adults, instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So first is bring them up, which is, the idea of raise them. Don't keep them too dependent on you and don't push them out into independence too soon. There's kind of a balance there. So get your kids to the point where eventually they don't need you in the sense of being, they're becoming independent. And so, give them the freedom to fail. And there's kind of a raise, raise is a gradation kind of word, gradual growth. Support them, that they need, you're giving them until independence. So I think the two words, though, here are really important, the training and instruction. Notice there's kind of a balance between those two words, and they're very intentional. So training, that's kind of the discipline part, training. Think of, this is Mr. Miyagi and Daniel's son. This is training. I'm training you in karate. And that's very much about discipline. The other side is kind of the instruction, which is more like the counseling, the dialoguing, the listening, the explaining. And it's very similar throughout scriptures. You'll see this constant balance between truth and love. Like, it's very important if you follow Jesus to believe the capital T absolute truths that God gives us, but also to be loving to people and be gracious to people. It's the truth and love balance. You can't get either out of balance or you're really out of whack. This is very similar here with training and instruction. When we first got our first dog, we got our first dog 7 years ago and he was probably 2.5, 3 years old when we got him. He's a rescue. He's a boxer mix. We named him Sullivan. And I never had a dad. Yeah, that too. I never had a dad or a dog. Now I feel robbed that I didn't have a dog all my life because we love our dogs so much. I'm like, man, Sullivan is the best. But our kids, we started this tradition, I think my wife started, at 7:30 p.m. every night. He gets one of those milk bone biscuits, a bone. And he knows the word bone. Bone. You know, he is on it, man. He's like, and when the time change happens, he is so confused. Because like, it's been dark 2 hours and you haven't given me a bone. What did I do today? You know? And so he just comes up and he just sits down so proper, starts swishing his tail on the kitchen floor. It's not time. He knows that word too. Or the phrase, not time yet. Okay, you know, so it's like, this is 5:30, dude. You got 2 hours. Get out of here. It's not time yet. Okay, not time yet. But my kids, they taught him tricks to get the bone. And so they pull out them at 7:30, bone, he goes running in or whatever. And they taught him, like, sit, and he would sit all proper. Oh, I'm so good. I'm such a good boy. Speak, roof. Shannon likes quiet, bark, calm, controlled. I'm like, give me a bark, dude. He gives me 2 loud barks before he gets to the bone. Roof, that's good. One more. Speak, roof. They're real loud, okay? I want the neighbors to hear it. And so spin, his name's Sullivan, so we call it the Vin spin. So they do this, and he goes around the circle, does the Vin spin. And then they taught him the kids taught him to lay down, and then they taught him roll over. So he rolls over, and he's a pretty decent-sized dog, 70 pounds or so. He rolls over, and then the best, my daughter Aslan taught him to play dead. He rolls over, and he lays, he lays on his belly sticking up, and he stays until she goes, pew, pew, and shoots him. And then he hops up, and he gets his biscuit. It's the best. It's the best. And so here's the point the balance between these two things of training and instruction. Okay, it's so important because if parents have too many rules, if you just have like rules on rules on rules, you're too critical because they're constantly breaking the 8 million rules that you have, then you're kind of forgetting that your kid's a human being, not a dog to be trained. I have so many things, there's so many rules. They're a human being. And you're never going to train them to be perfect. You're not perfect, and you have to remember that. And so it's like, man, I have to be careful that there's not too much training discipline. And, you know, it's like you're not a dog trainer, and you're not a sensei. You know, like when you shake an adult's hand, you always look down your son. You messed up again, you know. So it's like, not that that's a bad rule, that's a good thing. But if there's so many rules, it's like, this isn't a dog, this is a human being. On the other hand, and this is probably more the case today, is there's a lot of parents who won't enforce any rules, right? And half the room groans if they could out loud, like, yeah, I've been in Starbucks around them, you know. It's like there's no rules. And it's really, really tough because you're kind of forgetting it's like this is all too much dialogue or only dialogue. And you're forgetting that your kids, they're not adults. So they're not dogs, but they're also not adults. And so the dialogue is great, but it can't be all dialogue with no discipline. And so, man, it's such a balancing act. And Paul, in this really simple, short verse, has really given us it's both of these things. Parenting is both of these things. You know, parents, you know, they can be too critical, and they can't be too critical. They have to listen a lot. They have to be consistent with rules and discipline. You know, a best practice that I hear from good parents and people who teach good parenting is just that you lay down like good, smart rules that they stick to, and that are utterly predictable, and you're utterly predictable about enforcing them. It's like, here's what the rule is. Here's what the consequence will be if you don't do this, you know? Or here's why it's so important for you to do this and what the consequence you'll reap. Not even a punishment sometimes. You'll reap this consequence, the bad grade, you know, whatever it is, if you don't do this. I have a friend named Kevin O'Connor who's a cool Christian dude. When I worked at a church in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, I was there for 8 years, and I would organize on Saturday mornings flag football for a bunch of like high school, middle school up. and anybody could come. And we played rough. Like, it was flag, but we blasted people out of bounds, and we blocked hard. It was just like good rough. And there was this guy who was like 10 years older than everybody else who showed up, Kevin O'Connor. And I was always to him like, dude, you are such an inspiration to me. Like, I want to still be balling out when I am your age. He was 40. He was playing lacrosse and coaching lacrosse and just really fit. Now he's still 10 years older than me, and he still plays lacrosse. He's in triathlons, and I talked to him. He's like a broker for a company, so I talked to him about investing and mutual funds, and he's like my coach on that stuff. But every once in a while, I just ask him, what are you into now? I'm doing a triathlon, that kind of stuff. Just a stud. But he coaches lacrosse, and one time he told me back when I lived in that area, he said he had a policy on his team, if you cuss, you run laps. Now, I know some people are like, oh, a whole bunch of people in momentum would be running laps. I can look at you, okay? But he was like, if you cuss, you run laps. I'm coach. These are my rules. I'm not going to impose my faith on you, but these are the values I'm going to have on my team. So someone coached, you'd like, run some laps. And they always ran laps together at the beginning, the kids did. But then you cuss, you got some more laps. And so one day he was at the end of practice. He was talking about how practice went, and he was talking to them about the ways they were passing. And he said, you can't be out there throwing half-assed passes to each other. Like, you got to put some zing on them. And after practice, one of the kids on the team said to Kevin's son, Patrick, he was like, I've never heard your dad cuss before. And Patrick's like, I know. That was a surprise to me, too. And so after practice on the way home, Patrick says to his dad, Kevin, he's like, hey, Dad, I never heard you swear like that. Like, so-and-so brought it up. He goes, yeah, I can't believe you swore in front of the kids. He was like, what? He said, the thing you said about the passes, half-assing it? He was like, yeah. That's not a cuss word. He was like, oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a cuss word. I said, no, it's not. And they're arguing, it's not a cuss word. It is a cuss word. I'm asking Mom when I get home, oh, that's a bad call for the dad. Because Mom's value system of what's a cuss word and Dad's value system of what's a piss, oh, that's definitely a cuss. That's not a cuss word. That's what I do in the bushes after fireworks. Like, so it's like, no. So they're arguing. So they get home and ask Cindy, hey, is half-ass a cuss word? Oh, that's definitely a cuss word. Dang it. So the next day at practice, he gathers everybody together. He says, it has come to my attention that I used a word yesterday at practice that was inappropriate. I should have said it. So when we run laps today, I'm running with you. And everybody's like, whoa, like he's going to run with it. And that's leadership, isn't it? Like that's like there are going to be rules and they're going to be predictable. They're going to be blatantly predictable, like what will happen if you break a rule. But for dads, parents, moms, bosses, coaches, whatever, leaders are the example, not the exception. And that's the tough thing about leadership, man. That's the tough thing about parenting if you're doing it right, too, is like these aren't just I get to sit in my corner office and boss all these rules out there. Like leadership, typically people are like, oh, leaders got it so easy because blah, blah, blah. Leaders are usually repping over and over and over. This is the culture I want in my organization, in my church, in my family. I have to demonstrate that 10 times more than I say it. I got to do this because I'm the example, not the exception. 1 Thessalonians 2, also written by Paul. He says this. He's talking to a church that he has been with them, and he's tried to be an example to them and tell them the story of Jesus and the cross and the resurrection. And he says, for you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. I love what he says there. Is he's using an analogy of this is what a good dad looks like. And I know a lot of us either didn't have dads or didn't have a good dad or had an absent dad or a distant dad. But here, this is what a good dad looks like. In the analogy, he's encouraging, he's comforting, and he's urging you to live a life worthy of God. And what that means is when you're a follower of Jesus, you're not a perfect person. But the idea is I've received amazing grace because the cross of Jesus has paid for my sins. I put faith in Jesus, and this free thing of grace is given to me. So now in response to that amazing gift of grace, I want to live a life that's worthy of God. It doesn't mean I live a good life and that's how I get to heaven. The Bible says over and over, that is not the case. Your good deeds are like filthy rags to God. You need God's grace. And so once you receive that grace, oh man, I want to live a life worthy of the grace that I've received, and that's why I live a life of obedience. In Scripture, to kids, it kind of reveals to us in Scripture in many ways that from Genesis chapter 1, the beginning of the Bible, that kids and all humans are valuable image bearers of God. What that means is human beings in a way that no other creation, not redwoods, not platypuses, not cheetahs, we bear some characteristics, some similarities to God that no other creation bears. So we're image bearers, which means we're created in the image of God. That means every person is inherently valuable. This is the first of many reasons why racism is not okay among Christians. Every person has inherent value because they're made in the image of God. But Scripture goes on to say that we've all fallen into sin. And so, sure, a lot of image bearers are extremely marred. Some are jerks. Some are so hard to stomach, but still have inherent value because they're imago Dei. That's the Latin, made in the image of God. So we're broken. We're not wise. And we need to be forgiven and saved by faith in Jesus. And we need to be trained and instructed in godliness. And so here's why I'm saying this about kids and humans, is Proverbs 22:15 says something. I'd love to go in the second half of this verse, but I don't have time for it. But it says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child. And this is the task of parenting. Folly, which is foolishness, is bound up in the heart of the child. Man, when I was a kid, dude, when I was a kid, adolescent, preteen, adolescent, young adult, for me, it was a long period. When I was a kid, I was full of a combination of nonsense with a dash of common sense. Just nonsense, dash of common sense. Or some knowledge with gaping holes of ignorance. And I mean the dictionary definition. I don't know what I don't know. Like, there's so much ignorance. I don't know what I don't know about life and relationships and politics and all these. I don't even know what I don't know. But you act like you do. And you have clumps of stupidity. So I had very little responsibility and duty, but a lot of fun, comfort, and this is what feels good. And here's the point of parenting is children do not automatically grow up by themselves to be what God wants them to be. It takes very intentional, active involvement. They need discipline, they need instruction, they need love from parents. That's why God put parents in authority over kids and says, hey, obey, honor your father and mother. And so there's a lot of folly in the hearts of little kids, ignorance that they don't know what they don't know. And that's what teaching is about. So we can't be passive as a parent. My high school youth minister, I didn't become a Christian until I was 15. I was allowed to start going to church a year later when I was 16. And they hired a youth minister at the time named Lee McKinney. He's a cop now. But they hired him in Toledo, Ohio. And he's a pretty cool dude, like pretty sweet guy, but at times he just hit this direct truth. And I remember him saying once when I was a teenager, like some people say that simply by parents or a church teaching kids about Jesus that we're brainwashing children. He was like, come on, brainwashing children. He's like, children need to have their brains washed because they're full of crap. And it's like, that's the way to put it. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. Like that's the point of teaching, is we lead them out of ignorance, the things that they don't know. We're the ones that give them the discipline and the instruction. And when we don't discipline, which is usually the more lacking area for a lot of families, a lot of times it's because we're overcorrecting, like we were disciplined too much or very harshly. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's because we're tired or lazy. Let's be honest, we don't because we're like, if we take away that device, they are all on me all night, okay? Put away the devices. I'm taking your phone. Now I got to hear them all night whining about how they have nothing to do. Go put a puzzle together and shut up, It's like, man, oh man. And so you're like, it's a lazy parenting to be like, I can't punish them because it's going to punish me too. That's a punishment for me too. But really a lot of times it's because truly we want our kids' approval. The reason that we under-discipline, like we can't bear to have them look at us and think we were cruel. Because, wait a minute, you didn't let me go to that thing. You didn't let me have this. And so God makes it really clear we're supposed to seek his approval, not the approval of man. And sometimes the hardest people to practice that with is our own kids. Like, I got to remember that my approval is based in Christ. Like, I put my faith, he died for me to show me my value. And that's what my value is based on. Like, I don't need approval from other humans. And it helps me stick the landing of, and this is good for my kids, the training and the instruction. I can't worry about whether they're approving of me right now. So you will anger them in moments, but that's different than exasperating them going into adulthood. And that takes constant involvement. There's no time, day or night, where you aren't doing your job as a parent in so many ways. Justin Hengel, who was in that video, he mentioned to me at Momentum's men's camping retreat a couple weeks ago that in parenting, especially when your kids are little, the days are long, but the years are short. Like, you get to bath time and you're exhausted. I've worked all day. These kids are splashing around. They're not listening to me. They're pooping in the tub. And I'm like trying to do like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired right now. Those days are so long, but man, it's cliche. They fly by and the years are so short. One other point is Ephesians 6:4 says, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So that's really ultimately what we're talking about is if you love Jesus, and that's an if. I know not everybody here follows Jesus, but if you love Jesus, the point is I want to teach my kids about God. So you have to say to your children, this is who God is. Like, this is who he reveals himself to be. This is who God is to me. This is who God wants to be to you. He wants to be your God as he reveals to us in Scripture. And so it's natural for modern people today to say, oh, I don't want to impose my faith on my kids. I want them to choose for themselves. It's a very modern view, of parenting right now. But if you're a follower of Jesus, like Scripture's constantly telling you to talk about God and your love for God as you walk along the road, as you sit and eat, just to constantly be talking to them about your relationship with God. So vow to pray for your kids and with your kids, to openly talk to them about your walk and your spiritual story and say what God has meant to you. And as it becomes more appropriate over the years, to share with them where you've been. Because they might get this picture, mom and dad, they're so perfect. They're, this Christian. I know a lot of you say, no, my kids are never going to get that twisted. They know I'm broken. I just need the grace of Jesus because I am imperfect. But to talk to them about ways that God has saved you, ways that God has empowered you and delivered you. And walk with your kids through biblical truths. Some of you know them, some of you are just learning them. And as you learn, teach them to your kids. If you're, a dude, talk to your young men about godly manhood. Talk to your daughters about godly womanhood. God's view of work and responsibility. Living faithfully and being ready to serve. Biblical generosity, like Justin and Maria have been teaching grace, like stewardship and how to handle money. And even facing temptation and standing strong. Like some of you are going to buck at this title, but there's a tiny little book that I think is really helpful as a dad with boys by Dennis Rainey called Aggressive Girls, Clueless Boys. And it's just about how now as generations have gone on, it used to always be boys pursued. Now sometimes there's boys, believe it or not, there are boys who are clueless. Preteens, sometimes even in high school, who are pretty clueless, and the girls are sometimes the aggressors. And so just to have those talks early and often, about really important guy stuff, and this has some it has some short little chapters. It's a tiny book, and all the dads said, amen. So it's a tiny little book, short chapters. The chapters aren't like life-changing, but they will open your eyes to sometimes the way, the culture is of girls sometimes DMing boys, and boys do it too. This is to open the eyes of boys who don't see it coming and aren't prepared for girls propositioning them through Snapchat. And just to prepare and have conversations early and often about that stuff. And it's based on the book of Proverbs, which is all a mother and a father saying, my son, listen to my wisdom. And it's about how to deal with, faithfulness and adultery and to love the wife of your youth and all these things that are in the early chapters of Proverbs. For instance, like chapters 1 through 7 all are like, my son, my son. In fact, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 7th chapter and 6th, they all begin with my son or my sons. For instance, Proverbs 4:1, listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. And it's just a godly dude passing on valuable wisdom to his son. And then a counterpart of that, and the best part of that book, by the way, is there's these discussion questions at the end that are for you and your son. And I just took those and adapted those. Like, this is what works for me. and my relationship knowing my sons, and I would adapt those, but they were a really helpful cheating resource for me. And then there's a kind of a counterpart, which is interviewing your daughter's date. Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. Like I got a daughter, and she's coming up, and eventually some boy is going to ask her out a date, and I want to know how, I want to know how to kind of navigate it when that comes. And it's a little bit different than what, typically the world thing is like you meet the boy, and you're like, hey, what's up, boy? It's a little different than that, and I love his approach on what does it look like to have a conversation with a boy before they take your daughter out on a date, and I think it's really good. But again, short book. In 1995, I did an internship in Athens, Ohio, and it was a ministry internship for the summer for college, and I stayed with the Rolston family. It's Rick and Penny were the mom and dad, or the dad and mom, and they had two daughters, Jamie and Andy. Andy was like in late middle school, early high school. I think she's middle school. And they had one of those basketball hoops that, keeps your points as you shoot through it really fast. And her and I used to challenge each other to that all the time. And they also had a son, Lance. And Lance was a great athlete. Freshman year of high school, he was varsity baseball, basketball, football. Just a cool dude and a stud. He was a freshman in high school when I lived there. And I was going into my junior year, I think, or something of college. And or my senior year, I think. And so Penny, she loved Jesus. She would make us fresh chocolate chip cookies almost every night. And my college metabolism ate it up every night, fresh cookies from Penny. And Rick, just a godly dude, loved Jesus, prayer warrior. He is still the person outside of Cleveland who prays for me the most from a distance. He's had a leg amputated. He's been through suffering, and all he does is call and ask how he can pray for me and what can he do to support our ministry here. And just an amazing dude, but so generous. In fact, he pretty much funded most of my last two albums. My first two were more comedy-based. My third and fourth were more hip-hop with some fun stuff in it. And he just so loved how I was talking to people about Jesus through music. And it was expensive for studio time and to duplicate CDs back in that time. Explain to the young kids next to you what that is. And beats and all that stuff. I probably wouldn't have cut those two albums, which are the two I like the most, if it weren't for the generosity of Rick Rolston, who was like, I want to support this music ministry, basically. So a few years ago, I was speaking at Ohio Teens for Christ in Columbus, and Lance came, and Lance was a young man now, and like his early 20s, just big old stud, and he came to hear me speak in my last talk at this big Christian teen convention, and it was so cool, my last talk, to see him way in the middle of this crowd, sitting front and center, out in the middle, not front, but in middle center with my wife, Shannon. And I was like, Lance Rolston, he's grown up now. This is nuts. And sitting there with Shannon, listening to the sermon. And afterward, he came to my table where I had CDs and T-shirts and all that. And he wanted to buy a T-shirt, one of my T-shirts. I was like, dude, I'm not letting you buy a T-shirt. He's like, please, 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 let me buy a T-shirt. So he went on and on. Finally, he wrote me a check for the T-shirt and gave him a T-shirt, gave him a hug, went home. We get home, I open up my cash envelope thing or whatever and get the checks out of it. And I see he didn't give me $15. He wrote a check for the T-shirt for $150. That better be one comfy T-shirt. I was like, it's probably because I autographed it, you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, he gave $150. And Shannon, he wrote a check for $150. And the first thing I thought was, like father, like son. Like his dad is so generous. But his dad wasn't just talking about it. He saw his dad over and over and over and over being generous to God and being generous to people. And the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Just a godly, generous dude, and learned it from his dad. The axiom is famous. Character is more caught than taught. It's both. You have to talk about it, but you say it and you do it 10 times. And you say it and you do it 10 times. It's more caught than taught. You have to say it, but they have to see it over and over and over. And one of the coolest things about all this is just the Bible makes it clear for a Christian man that you can become a spiritual father to people who aren't even your kids. And for kids who don't have dads or good dads or whatever their situation was, they can find spiritual fathers in the church who love them deeply, who will show them compassion, who will care for them and about them, who will spur them on toward love and good deeds, who will influence them spiritually, like maybe a little bit of jawing, like happens with some of the dads, but mostly encouragement. A little bit of joy with tons of encouragement because they haven't gotten that sometimes. Or their dad doesn't follow Jesus and they don't know what a Christian man looks like. That's a new thing to them. Last thing, years ago, I read about this Native American tribe that has a really cool rite of passage for their boys. When a boy's approaching manhood, the dad blindfolds them at night and takes them out into the forest and sits them on a stump. And he sits there all night. The dad leaves them, and he sits there all night hearing things in the woods. He doesn't know if that's a wild beast. Is that a human that could harm me? Walking in, and he's not allowed to take the blindfold off till the sun comes up, and he feels the warmth on his face. And he sits there scared to death all night, hearing all the noises. And he's not allowed to take the blindfold off. He's not allowed to yell for help. Just sits there till finally the warmth of the sun hits his face. He pulls off the blindfold, and his dad's sitting in the stump next to him the whole night, protecting him. And this is like such a cool picture of the Heavenly Father of, that's what faith is believing the Heavenly Father's sitting there right with me. Anytime I need him, I can reach out to God, and he will start showing up for me in my life. Tim Keller, a passed away minister, used to say, who in the world can wake up a king at 3 a.m.? No one can, except for his child. And how cool that we have 3 a.m. access to a Heavenly Father who is a good Father, in spite of any negative examples we've seen, a good Father that we can call on anytime, waiting there to protect us. Let's pray.